Falling in love with Jesus.
What's good, everybody? Welcome back to another video. I think this is probably our first sit down conversation. Yay! Our first sit down conversation. But I just wanted to hop on here real quick. Y'all gonna see me looking down because I have notes. I didn't want to go off track. But I really wanted to talk around the topic that God can disappoint you. And I know it's not something, at least I've not heard it a lot. I've not heard conversations about it a lot, and I was thinking, like, why not? Why not? Because I think we can fall. I don't want to say victim, sound like a bit too strong, but I don't want I don't want us to create this false narrative that we don't experience disappointment as Christians. We don't experience disappointment when we are expecting God to move a certain type of way, or we're even expecting the promise that He said, and it just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen within a certain timeline. It doesn't happen with those we thought it would, or it doesn't happen with the things that we thought it would have happened, and so forth and so on. Because disappointment can be small and they can be big. But at the end of the day, if we're not careful and it's not managed properly, then disappointment ultimately yields our heartbreak, yields, dose, yields distance. And this was something that a friend of mine were even talking about briefly. And it kind of rests with me because for a season, I never wanted to admit that God, I'm scared you might disappoint me, or God, you did disappoint me, or God, this is how I'm feeling, and the disappointment that I'm feeling in you is kind of heavy, and I don't know if I can trust you with this aspect of my life anymore. And I think sometimes as Christians, we find it hard to admit that just because we don't want to seem like a bad Christian. So if this is a topic that you wanna delve a little bit into and hear my take on it, then let's continue chatting and keep watching the video. Alrighty, y'all. So I have these in pointer form. So the first one is that disappointment seems the heaviest when we feel we are most out of control. The truth is, we had a certain expectation. We had a desire for something to work out a certain type of way, and we had some form of certainty about us about a certain thing, right? And when we're disappointed, it's because one, there was an unmet expectation, and two, we feel like we're no longer in control of a situation. Because with disappointment, it means it means that a level of certainty has now been relinquished. Like, have to be like, this is not what I wanted, but this is the reality of where I'm at. This is what happened, right? And it seems the heaviest when we feel like we're most out of control, because it feels like we can't get our grip back. We don't know where our footing is. We don't know how to handle it. We don't know how to navigate these feelings. We don't know how to navigate the situation, especially if there are multiple parties involved. You're now dealing with multiple emotional levels, emotional strengths, capacities, all sort of stuff. And it just feels like it's out of your hands. And when that happens, is like you feel a sense of helplessness, which as human beings we really don't like feeling that way, because it means that we can no longer mold it, shape it into what we want. No, disappointment also gives us the opportunity. This is point number two. Disappointment also gives us the opportunity to find God in the in between stages. I think sometimes, and this is kind of tying in with another point, but I think oftentimes when we think about disappointment, we think that there's nothing to learn from it, or we feel that we have to lose everything all at once before we can learn from it. Again, disappointment can be in stages. It doesn't have to be a big blowout for us to feel disappointment and learn from it. We can find God in those in between stages where we are not where we used to be, but we didn't get what we want, and we're faced with another reality. Okay, God, what are you trying to teach me? Okay, God, what are you saying? All right, this didn't go how I wanted it to, but I'm still here and the opportunity still exists. So it's one of the two things. Either this is not the way I'm supposed to go and you're blocking my path, literally, God, or there's something else I'm not seeing and you're not giving it to me because there are other factors involved. So it's an opportunity to see God in the in between stages and to bring it back to Him, because again, ultimately, disappointment means that there was an unmet expectation, an unmet desire or need. So it's also challenging us to go back to God and say, all right, what's happening here, right? Third point. Disappointment tends to push us into a space of assessment, but it also helps to redirect us back to God. And this doesn't mean, as I said, you have to lose everything at once, but it can be an invitation to bring it back to God. I think sometimes when we get the promise, if we're not careful, we can be so fixated on the promise that we forget the instruction of how to get into the promise. We forget what God said. And we can oftentimes fall into disappointment, and instead of taking it back to God, we think we need to throw it away altogether. When sometimes it's just the disappointment is redirecting us back to God. It's taking us back into His presence and allowing us to realize that we can't do without Him. Right? It's carrying us back to a state where we're at His feet saying, God, I don't want to take another step without you guiding me. So sometimes the disappointment is also a way of God reeling us back in so we don't fall and we don't falter and we don't fail and we don't slip slide buck we head and get one cocoa. you know so sometimes it is a time for assessment and it's a time for redirection. It's not always a time to say, going into our fourth point, disappointment does not mean that you failed. Again, it can easily be a redirection. And I also want to put it here that God can disappoint us, but one thing He will never do is fail us. And that's the truth. He says what He says and He means what He says. How we expect Him to do it all the time is not what's going to happen. His ways are not our ways and His thoughts are not our thoughts, which means that the things that we think should happen in our time, or the things that should happen how we want it to or we expect it to, doesn't always happen that way. How we think things should happen doesn't always happen that way. How we expect things to end doesn't always happen that way. But it doesn't mean that God has failed us, and it doesn't mean that He lied. It just means it didn't happen in the way we thought it would. Does that mean that the promise no longer exists? No. It just means that we need to lean into Him a little more to figure out, all right, God, I thought it was fun. It was going to be this way, but it's not. So, like, what's going on? How do you want me to deal with this? How do you want me to navigate? God can disappoint you because He doesn't think like you, but He will never fail you. And this is why we have scriptures that says that eyes have not seen, ears have not heard, nor has it entered into the hearts and minds of man, the things that the Lord is ready to do. And He can do exceedingly abundantly above all that we could think or imagine, because His word still stands above all else. It's just that sometimes the ways that He presents things to us and the ways that He grooms us and grows us and develops us may not be the way we want to go. Okay, and that's just the reality. It may not be the way we wished we had to develop. It may not be the way we wished He had to grow us, He had to stretch us, He had to give us capacity for. And the truth is that because we just prefer an easy life. And if you're walking the Christian life, that's not how it's gonna go. You'll have easy seasons, maybe. You'll have favorable seasons, but it's never an easy life. Because just as how we embrace His blessings, there's also a season of suffering. There's also a season of endurance. There's also a season of pruning. Like, there are different methods and ways that the Lord grows us. And sometimes it looks like disappointment. Sometimes we look at disappointment as an automatic failure, when sometimes disappointment is just to reiterate that the story is bigger than you. So I know disappointment also comes with a lot of questions. It comes with other emotions. Sometimes it can come with anger. It can come with helplessness. It can come with sadness. It can come with deep grief. But sometimes it's also a reminder that our story is greater than the disappointment that we're sitting in, which means that it's bigger than us and means that the story is greater than us. And the story is not just for us. There are other persons that are going to be able to relate to our story. There are other persons that are crying out to God to have a representative, to have somebody that they can relate to have somebody that shares their story, that understands. And sometimes we're that chosen vessel, and our disappointment now becomes the, I don't want to say platform, but for a lack of a better word, sometimes our disappointment becomes the platform for somebody else's deliverance and their freedom. And there is victory on the other side of the disappointment. That is always the case. There is better, there is victory, there is greater on the other side of the disappointment, and there's renewal, there's restoration, there is joy, and there will come a time where when we will say to the Lord, I understand now. I may not have understood in the process, which we never really do, but I understand now because of the lives that you've allowed me to impact, because of how you've groomed me, and prepared me for the next season, right? I think we also have to understand that disappointment can also be a time of testing of the heart, because sometimes we think we're ready for certain things until the disappointment hits and we're faced to walk it out. I think a lot of times we have a lot of talk, which is the truth. Sometimes we have a lot of talk, but when that disappointment really sets in, it really challenges and exposes the crevices of our heart and even of our mind to say, are we really going to walk this out, or are we just going to cave in and give it up? Because a lot of time when disappointment comes, it's easier to give up. It's easier to cut it off. It's easier to release it, to let it go and just say, you know what, it ain't for me, and that's it. But what happens when that disappointment comes to test your heart and to test if you really endure, to test if you will really pursue and you persist and you will be resilient and you will seek the Lord like never before? What happens when disappointment is presenting before you the question of, are you going to trust what God said, or are you going to just do it your way and just give up? So sometimes it tests the hearts. It tests, going into our sixth point, it exposes our fallow ground, and it can make us really question if our relationship with the Lord is transactional or it's relational. Are we only seeking the Lord for the things that we can get? And the moment He disappoints us, the moment He says no, the moment He says wait, the moment He says not this way, are we puffed up and then we don't want to have anything to do with God? So is it transactional or is it relational? Point number 7, disappointment is a teacher. So we can either choose to ignore the lessons it has for us, or we can take notes from the teacher and improve and avoid the same mistakes. For some of us, we're being disappointed quite often because we're just not learning. Like, we're repeating cycles and we're not changing. We're being presented with the same test in the form of disappointment over and over, and we have not learned. We have not seen that we're circling the same answers for the same questions, and we're expecting a different outcome. That's what they call insanity. Doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting change. So disappointment can be our teacher. And the final point, as I said, is disappointment comes with questions. But here's the thing, it leaves you with the choice of trust. A trust and a hope that God is still in control and there's more to the story. If we succumb to disappointment and we succumb to the constant weariness, we can never, ever zoom out far enough to understand that there's a bigger picture. And it will be hard to trust the Lord if we believe that He's not good. It will be hard to trust the Lord if we don't stand on His promises. And sometimes disappointment, I'll put this in, disappointment helps us to search deeper for the truths of God and His nature. Because when we're constantly disappointed, the scripture talks about hope deferred makes the heart grow weary. When we're constantly disappointed, weariness is inevitable because now you believe that what God said does not stand and it doesn't apply to you, and He's not true, and that's not the case. So sometimes disappointment can even push us into seeking the face of God even more because you now have to choose, am I going to trust an all knowing God, the one who created the heavens and the earth, who knows the beginning from the end, who has kept me thus far and sustained me through a lot? Am I going to choose to trust Him, or am I going to let my emotions dictate not just my eternity? Because that sounded real drastic. But am I going to allow my emotions to now corrupt and spoil the future that the Lord has for me because of a temporary moment, when I could choose to trust Him and ask Him to give me the grace to not just go through this disappointing season or disappointing moment, but am I also going to ask Him for the grace to believe Him? All right, y'all. So this is all I have for you. This was a really calm video. It was a calm time, but let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Is there anything else you'd add? Do you agree? What has your experience been with disappointment? And how have you reconciled just experiencing disappointment in your life and still having a good framework and perspective of who God is in your life? So yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you are not a part of Mandy's squad. Child, join the squad. Thank you very much. As you can clearly see, we are growing, we are changing, and that's okay. We are changing, we're evolving, and we're just looking forward to whatever God has in store for us. Alrighty, so don't miss out on the train, don't miss out on the progress, don't miss out on what's happening. Bye, and I'll see you in the next video.